It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. 2 more days, or 3 days, I guess, if you count today, before we officially hit the weekend, and then it's the week of Christmas, and then we're going to blink, and then it's going to be New Year's Day, and it's going to be great. I've been thinking a lot about this Indiana and Notre Dame football game, and I've got questions about this game, right? Like, first and foremost, I'm extremely excited, just like everyone else in the state. Indiana, Notre Dame. I love talking to Notre Dame fans about it because they just roll their eyes at even the thought of Indiana beating them in football. And I can very easily see it happening. Okay, I think this is a great matchup. There's a lot of strength on strength, like what Indiana's good at doing. Notre Dame's good at defending. What Notre Dame's good at doing offensively, Indiana's good at defending. And so, like, we're going to get this strength on strength for 3 hours on Friday night, and I can't wait. And as I was thinking about the game last night, I came up with 4 questions. I wanted to do a full 6-pack of questions, but I couldn't quite get there. So I've got 4 questions about Indiana and Notre Dame in terms of things that are going to determine the outcome. First question is, how does Indiana deal with the Notre Dame run game, and how does Notre Dame establish their run game? That is going to be the biggest thing in this game. Notre Dame is all about running the football. That is what they want to do. And when I say that, your mind probably jumps straight to Jeremiah Love, one of the better running backs in the country, despite not rushing for over 1,000 yards on the year. He's at like 927. The guy is an absolute freak. Fast, quick. If you get on Twitter and your phone hears you talking about Notre Dame enough, you are sure to see a montage of Jeremiah Love jumping over defenders. Okay? He's a really good running back. Notre Dame has leaned on him a lot this year, but they've also relied quite a bit on Riley Leonard's legs, their transfer quarterback in from Duke. Curt Cignetti was asked earlier in the week during his press conference about not only dealing with, Jeremiah Love and the running backs that Notre Dame has, because they have really good backs, but he was also asked about dealing with Riley Leonard's ability to run as the quarterback. Here's Coach Cignetti talking about Notre Dame's quarterback run game.
I think at this point in the season, you've seen about everything, right? And you put the best scheme together based on who you're playing and what they do. And, Notre Dame's an excellent football team. They're extremely well coached. In reference to your point, they run the quarterback quite a bit. And he's an excellent player. I've been watching him for a couple years, studying Duke offense when he was at Duke. And, he's a competitor, and he throws the ball well, and he's got good movement skills, good size. So, when you play Notre Dame offensively, it starts with the run game, and the quarterback's a big part of the run game, not only on the design quarterback runs, but when he drops back and he's in the pocket and escapes the pocket, and his ability to, create plays with his arm and his legs.
Curt Cignetti right there talking about Riley Leonard, Notre Dame's starting quarterback, transfer in from Duke, a really talented kid, like extremely talented. I remember watching him play at Duke last year. The draft guys were like, he's the 3rd best quarterback in what was supposed to be this year's draft class. He's dropped quite a bit because he hasn't had a very good year. He hasn't thrown the ball a ton. I think it's because Notre Dame doesn't really trust him. More on that here in a bit. But as I said, the Riley Leonard run game for Notre Dame is a big deal, right? He ran for over 700 yards this year on 124 carries. That's like 6 yards a carry. So he's going to run the football on Friday night because it's going to be cold and it could be wet and it could just be good old Indiana weather. Luckily for Indiana, though, this is the thing to watch. Indiana has one of the best run defenses in the country. Pretty sure that they're ranked number 1 by the numbers, but as we know, that Indiana's schedule is pretty soft. So who knows if it's really the best or not. Either way, it's really good. They defend the run as well as anybody in the country. As Notre Dame head coach Freeman highlighted in his press conference earlier in the week.
Moving along to Indiana, obviously it's a 11-1 football team, very talented, but you can tell they're coached well. They play, as I often say, with the clarity that you look for when you watch film. Right, it's a team that plays fast, a team that understands what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and so you can tell they understand what's expected of them. They make quick and fast decisions. A very disruptive, chaotic defense that is, I think, number 1 in the country at stopping the run. And so we understand it'll be a great challenge for us, and we got to have a great week of prep as we get ready for Friday night. Again, I think they play aggressively. I often say they create chaos. They have a really unique scheme in terms of some of their twist games and pressure packages, but they're talented and they play hard. Their D-line is really, really good, and it's hard to simulate some of the things they do in practice. But our scout guys have done a good job at trying to give us a really good look, as they've done all year. But they are well coached, they're aggressive, and they're a confident group.
Coach Freeman of Notre Dame right there talking about Indiana's run defense. And this, for me, this is the biggest thing to watch on Friday night. Notre Dame wants to run the football. It is all that they want to do. They don't want to throw the ball. Okay, the receivers aren't super dynamic. Riley Leonard's had some games this year where he hasn't been very good. So Notre Dame wants to line it up and run the football Friday night. And I think that this is where the game will be decided. Okay, Notre Dame's dynamic rushing attack against the best part of Indiana's football team, that front seven. If Notre Dame can run the ball Friday night, then they will win the game. If Indiana can slow down Notre Dame's rushing attack, then they will have a great chance to win the game. Okay, Notre Dame, as Notre Dame always does, has a great offensive line. They've got multiple running backs. They've got a quarterback who can run the football, but they don't want to throw it. That's why they've barely thrown for 2,000 yards on the season. They don't want to throw the football. Their leading receiver has less than 450 receiving yards on the year. Notre Dame wants to line it up, just out physical you, right? Push you around, reset the line of scrimmage, and do all those things. They want to run the ball because their best players are their running backs and their quarterback, who's dynamic and athletic, right? But once again, they don't want to throw the ball because Riley Leonard's had some not so great stretches this season in terms of his ability to throw the football. They played 1-11 Florida State, and he barely completed half of his passes. I don't know if you watched the Texas A&M game early in the year, but things didn't look too great for Riley Leonard in that game. To be fair, the A&M defense, pretty solid this year. And then, of course, against Northern Illinois, he threw 2 interceptions and didn't even throw for over 200 passing yards. Okay, this is an offense that can really struggle to throw the football at times. That's why they rely on the run game so much, right? And since that Northern Illinois game where he threw 2 picks and wasn't very good, there's been a greater emphasis on trying to run the football. 7 out of Notre Dame's 12 games this year, Riley Leonard threw less than 25 passes. That is a really small amount in college football today. Okay, and in this era of college football where teams want to spread you out, throw it all over the field, Notre Dame doesn't want to do that. And I think it's because they simply don't trust Riley Leonard to do it. So if Indiana can get out to a lead early, if they have some sort of lead late, and they force Indiana to throw the football, they will have a great chance to win this game. The issue is I have some concerns about Indiana's offense, which leads me to my second question about this game. How does Indiana deal with Notre Dame's defense? Because we've seen Indiana struggle offensively this year against good defenses. Just go back and watch the Michigan game and the Ohio State game. Those are the two best defenses that they played all year. They scored 15 total points against Ohio State. They scored 20 points against Michigan, 17 coming in the first half. And then they didn't move the ball at all in the second half. The only reason why they were able to score 3 points is because their defense forced a turnover. Okay, the two best defenses that Indiana played all year, they had their two worst showings on offense all year. And this Notre Dame defense, look, I think it's pretty obvious. I am not a big Notre Dame fan if you've listened to my show throughout the college football season. But I'm not dumb. I've seen Notre Dame play enough to know that Notre Dame has an outstanding defense, right? Marcus Freeman was the defensive coordinator before he was promoted to head coach. They are going to be sound defensively. They have a lot of talent on the back end. This is one of the best defenses in the country. That is how good Notre Dame is on defense. Okay. And I'm very intrigued to see how Indiana deals with this fast, physical, and talented Notre Dame defense. Here is Curt Cignetti earlier in the week talking about the Notre Dame defense.
They're good. Their defense is good. And Al Golden does a great job of coordinating their defense. And, they're high pressure blitz outfit, quite a bit of man coverage. And then, they got the zone mixers and fire zones that keep you off balance a little bit. But they get 11 guys doing their job pretty consistently. They play fast. They're physical. They're good tacklers. And they get a lot of hats to the ball. And they adjust well during the course of the game. They haven't given up many points because, they got good coaches and they got good players. And up front, they're quick, a lot of movement. But when you take into account then the blitzes, right, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and they play coverage extremely well. They do a great job in man coverage. So they're a really good defense, and that's why they've won a lot of games.
Curt Cignetti right there talking about Notre Dame's outstanding defense, right? And he mentioned it multiple times there in that clip, the most concerning parts about the Fighting Irish and their defense. Notre Dame likes to blitz, and that's problematic for Indiana. Do you remember the Ohio State game? I remember it like it was yesterday because that's the best team that Indiana played all year. That's probably the best defense that they played all year, and it was not pretty, except for that first drive. Indiana comes out, move it right down the field. I mean, Curtis Rourke on time, on target, running the football for 4-5 yards a pop. Receivers winning on the outside. You're like, oh, this could be a game. It felt like Indiana had a chance to win that game because they moved it right down the field. They went up 7-0. And then what happened from the second drive and the third drive and the fourth drive and every other meaningful drive in that game? Ohio State was like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to blitz all night. Like it was, remember the Titans. They were sending linebackers. They were running stunts and showing exotic pressures. And Indiana was awful from that point forward. They really, really struggled because Ohio State had really athletic linebackers like Notre Dame does, and they sent them on blitzes, and Indiana's offensive line simply could not handle it. So, and I can tell you right now, Notre Dame is going to go back. They're going to watch that tape against Ohio State, and they're going to be like, you know what we're going to do to Indiana? What we like to do, blitz. And if Indiana can handle it, then they'll have a decent chance to win. My thing is, watching that game, I don't think it was a preparedness issue for Indiana. Ohio State's linebackers were just freakishly talented, and Notre Dame is built the exact same way. So I don't expect for Indiana to be able to hold up against a defense like Notre Dame's that really likes to blitz, a defense like Notre Dame's that has the talent on the outside to play man-to-man and guard these good but not great Indiana receivers. Like, they don't have a receiver that's going to play in the NFL for 8 years, that's obviously an advantage for Notre Dame because they have guys in the secondary who will play in the NFL for like 6, 7, or 8 years. So very interested to see how, Indiana deals with the pressure looks that Notre Dame is going to throw their way, which leads me to my third question about this Ohio State, about this Notre Dame and Indiana game. How does Curtis Rourke perform? Seriously, look, we can talk about defenses blitzing and all these things, but if Curtis Rourke has the answers, then it won't really matter because he's been great this year. He got some Heisman votes, which is cool. That's, more votes than I ever got. He struggled against the better defenses that he faced this year, though, which is once again problematic because Notre Dame is one of the better defenses in the country, right? When Ohio State heated him up, he was bad. When they couldn't run the ball against Michigan in the second half, he struggled. And once again, this is a legit Notre Dame defense that he's facing on Friday. And they are going to present a lot of issues for Indiana because they're so much more talented than Indiana is. But Curtis Rourke's played a lot of football, right? This is year 6. Okay, he's seen everything. And because he's played so much and he's had a lot of good moments this year, Coach Cignetti has a lot of faith in him. And he expressed the faith that he has in Curtis Rourke earlier in the week.
Well, a lot of things go into that. First of all, he had a body of work before he came here, and he's played a lot of football. So, you learn by doing. And he's gotten a lot of reps at playing quarterback, a lot of successful reps. And, coming to a new school is an adjustment schematically. Some of the concepts may be similar, but the language is different. And obviously a new way of doing things, new players and what have you. And a lot of new portal guys at receiver. And so, but I think it all starts with protection. We've done a pretty good job of protecting him most of the time. We have certainly had our hiccups during a couple games. And we've got a group of receivers that have really good ball skills and can make contested catches, and our backs are good out of backfield as well. And I think, schematically, a lot of our pass plays, they have answers versus man zone, 1 high, 2 high. And he's a quick thinker, and he processes quickly, and he's extremely accurate. And he's good in the pocket. He doesn't panic. And, he's a really good quarterback, and he has certainly taken his game to another level. There's no doubt about that. He was a player of the year in the MAC in 22, but suffered an injury at the end of the season. So he really could not benefit from sort of the off-season strength and conditioning program going into his senior year. Still had a good year. But since he's come here on a bigger stage, I think he's built on every success and developed more confidence and belief and continues to improve. And I think you really saw that starting game 2 and then out on the West Coast against UCLA. And then, when you can involve 10, 12 different guys in terms of touches between running backs, tight ends, and receivers, that's a great thing to have multiple guys that can separate, get open, and make plays.
Kurt Cignetti talking about his quarterback right there, Curtis Rourke, who he's clearly very, very fond of. He went pretty long there talking about how Curtis Rourke is built on his successes and his time at Ohio when he was in the MAC and all those things. Here's the issue, though. All of Curtis Rourke's successes came against bad teams. When he played good defenses, he wasn't very good. He was 17 of 28 for 206 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception against Michigan. Fine. That's a fair game. Solid. That's not good enough to beat a team like Notre Dame, though. Then against the Buckeyes, he was 8 of 18 for 68 yards. His worst performance of the year by far. Okay, Indiana, the most important thing for them on Friday night is to find some sort of consistent run game. Because when you watch Curtis Rourke, he is most comfortable when he allows that RPO game to work. Right, when he's just reading and making those easy little slants and curl route throws, okay? That's where Curtis Rourke has been his best this year, okay? And that's only going to happen. Indiana can only run those RPOs if Indiana's offensive line can generate a push, if they can create a consistent run game, because that's really what Indiana wants to do. When you look at how often they run the ball versus how often they throw it. If they run 70 plays in a game, they're going to run it 40 and they're going to throw it 30 times. Like they want to run the football, right? Because then it opens up the RPO game and everything like that. So the Indiana offensive line has to be good in this game. They have to not only give Curtis Rourke time to throw on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, they have to not only pick up blitzes, but more importantly, they have to create opportunities for Indiana to run the football. Okay. And their struggles against the blitzing Buckeyes and their inability to block on the interior against Michigan in the second half, or when the offense struggled the most. And Marcus Freeman was asked about Rourke and this Hoosier offensive line earlier in the week, and here's what he had to say.
Every great offense is led by a quarterback, and this is no different. He's a veteran. He's been in big games. He's played in a lot of football games, and he makes really good decisions. Like, he knows where he's going with the ball. He knows what he's looking for, and he is able to execute at a high level. But more than that, I think their offense being able to run the ball is something that they've done really efficiently. And when you think about weather conditions, you think about a Friday night in South Bend, Indiana, weather could have an impact on the football game. And they've done a really good job running the ball. And so we have to prepare, obviously, for the things he does well in the passing game, but we got to make sure we can stop the run too.
Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame head coach, right there talking about this Indiana offense that's scored a lot of points this year against a not very good schedule. Indiana's ability to run the football is what's going to determine the outcome of this game. I think that they're going to find success on defense, stopping the Notre Dame run game just enough to give themselves a chance to win on Friday night. The question is, can they create consistent offense against probably the second best defense that they're going to face all year? And then finally, last question here on this Indiana and Notre Dame game. Who's going to make the big swing plays? Who's going to make the big swing plays? Notre Dame and Indiana both do a fantastic job of not turning the ball over and also forcing turnovers. And turnovers and special teams in games like this often dictate the outcome of big games. Notre Dame is good at both of those things. Indiana struggled against Ohio State in the special teams aspect of the game. Okay, gave up a punt return for a touchdown. Their punter dropped a snap. It wasn't good. And here's Curt Cignetti talking about Notre Dame's ability to force turnovers and how dominant they've been on special teams this year.
I think we're plus 15 in turnover ratio. They're plus 16. And they've forced 25 fumbles on a season. That's a high number. So ball security for us and them is going to be really important. Winning the turnover battle. I'll tell you, the other area that they're really dangerous is, their punt return team. They've blocked 3 punts and forced a couple bad snaps because of the pressure they put consistently. So they've gotten points there. And then, when they punt, they faked 3 punts, which those kind of plays can be game changers in a game. So they use their punt return as weapons. And we got to be right on point. Our teams have been really consistent this year other than the Ohio State game. And we're going to need a good special teams effort this week.
Curt Cignetti right there talking about defense and special teams, something that often gets overlooked, but can, dictate the outcome of a game, right? We saw how important special teams can be against that Ohio State game. Okay, when you're the less talented team, like Indiana is going to be on Friday night against Notre Dame, you have to do all of the little things well. So you can't, give up a blocked punt. You can't allow Notre Dame to return a punt for a touchdown. You can't drop the snap. You can't do things like that. You can't turn the ball over. Okay, so when it comes to Indiana on Friday night, special teams has to either be invisible or a major positive. And what I mean by invisible is, like, if you don't bring up the special teams on Saturday when you're talking to your buddies about the Indiana and Notre Dame game, that means that nothing major happened and Indiana simply did their job in that phase of the game. Okay? And then, of course, like, you can't turn the ball over, which Indiana's done a really good job of this season. So I am very intrigued by this game. As I said, to kind of open the segment, like, this is strength on strength. Indiana wants to run the football and, do the RPO game. But Notre Dame's got a good front seven, and they do a really good job of stopping the run. And it's the same thing on the other side. Notre Dame doesn't want to put the game in Riley Leonard's hands. They want to run the football, and Indiana's front seven has been the best and most consistent part of this Indiana football team all year. We're getting a lot of strength on strength, and special teams and turnovers could very easily be the reason why a team wins or loses the game Friday night. Just so much stuff going on. It's quite frankly amazing. Coming up here in about 4 minutes, there's been a lot of talk with the Indianapolis Colts about firing the head coach and firing Chris Ballard and what would they do. And I explained yesterday why I don't think it'll happen. But I might have a solution that would allow the Colts to fire Chris Ballard, fire Shane Steichen, and hire an amazing head coach afterwards. I've got that solution when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Make sure you download that Indy Sports Ticket app so you can listen to not only my show, but also the Dan Dawkins Show from noon to 3 yesterday on my show and Dan's show. I kind of laid out why I expect for the Indianapolis Colts to bring back Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard back for another season, despite all the losing that has transpired over the last 2 seasons. And to put it in short, Ballard signed an extension through 2026. Shane Steichen is under contract through 2030. And I just think it would be really hard for Jim Irsay to swallow the pill of paying not 1, not 2, but 3 head coaches and 2 general managers. Like that's a lot of people to pay. Imagine paying 3 people who don't work for you. That's not something fun, right? Frank Reich is still on the books till 2026. Shane's on the book until 2030. And then, Chris Ballard also on the books until 2026. So if they fired both guys, then you would have to pay both Ballard, the new GM, Shane Steichen, Frank Reich, and the new head coach. And that's just a lot of money to fork out to 3 people who don't work for you, plus 2 new hires. But what if there was a solution to the issue? What if, there was like this idea that could potentially change everything? What if, instead of hiring a new head coach and a new general manager, they just hired one person to do both? Jim Irsay should hire Mike Vrabel to be both the head coach and the general manager. Mike Vrabel said earlier during the season that he would go coach the Jets if he approved the general manager hire. And I got to be honest, I don't think he'd disapprove of himself. Okay, Mike Vrabel is going to want to have a say in personnel no matter where he goes. So just let him do both. He's the most coveted head coaching candidate in the hiring cycle this year, right? Because he went to Tennessee and he won a bunch of games with a bad quarterback. Okay? He knows the AFC South better than any other head coaching candidate that's available. Let's be honest. If the Colts decided to move on from Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, it would not be the most attractive job. Okay, like the Jets job is more attractive than the Colts one because whoever resurrects the Jets will be viewed as a god in New York, which would be kind of cool. The Bears have Caleb Williams. The Raiders are going to have like a top pick where they can draft Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. The Jaguars have Trevor Lawrence. All of those jobs are more enticing than the Colts offer of an average roster, a raw quarterback that hasn't shown a ton. It's not a great job. So if the Colts wanted to hire a guy like Mike Vrabel, they would have to offer him something better than everyone else is offering. And offering Mike Vrabel absolute control could be that thing, allowing him to be both the general manager and the head coach. It takes one extra person off the books. You obviously have to pay Mike Vrabel a little bit more than a normal head coach, but it still wouldn't be as much money as paying both the general manager and a new head coach. Okay, so you would save a little bit of money in that regard. Okay, and look, offering him absolute control with his track record wouldn't be like a super deterring thing. I would trust him to do both, given the amount that he's won in Tennessee. Okay, if the Colts want to inject toughness and a winning culture throughout their entire franchise, then having a guy like Mike Vrabel to both select the players and coach the players would do that almost immediately. I bet that the Colts would stop drafting players who don't take accountability when they mess up a trick play. I don't think that if Mike Vrabel selected the players that they would have drafted A.D. Mitchell. I don't think that if Mike Vrabel was the head coach that Jonathan Taylor would have dropped the football before crossing the goal line. Let Mike Vrabel do both. Make that offer to him. If he wants it, fire Ballard and Steichen and go get him. And inject toughness and winning and a nice culture into this Colts organization, something that they haven't had in, over a decade now. Okay, go get Mike Vrabel. Let him do both. That would be the best thing for the Colts to do this offseason. Now, speaking of, guys dropping the ball before crossing the goal line, Jonathan Taylor couldn't hide for forever. Okay, he didn't take questions after the game on Sunday, or at least I didn't see him. If he did, maybe I'm just bad at my job. I don't know. But he answered questions, yesterday, or maybe it was Monday. I don't know. Here's what he had to say. I didn't grab that audio. Gosh dang it. He talked yesterday about dropping the ball before crossing the goal line. And, he laid it out pretty simply, just like I can't do that. I failed my teammates. Things aren't good. Like, I have to be better. He did, he just kind of laid it all out. And that's just a, unacceptable thing to do. I think I've got the audio now. Here's Jonathan Taylor talking about dropping the ball before crossing the goal line. Jonathan Taylor right there after the game on Sunday. I guess I just suck at my job, not being able to find that audio. Anyway, I like Jonathan Taylor. He seems like a nice guy. He answered the questions fine. If I'd crossed the goal line, would have had 6 more points, all those things. I shouldn't have done it. I apologize. I did all these things. That's great. That's nice. Either way, you can't drop the ball before you cross the goal line, man. Like, high school players at Carmel High School know that. And the interesting thing about it is when this happened, like when it happened, like I'd be like slightly more understanding if this was like a preseason game or if it was week 18 and the Colts had already clinched a spot in the playoffs and, like, okay, sure. Like a game that doesn't really matter. I get it. Cool. But in this game, like to have this slip up in the biggest game of the year, I think speaks to 2 things. One, Shane Steichen's ability to have his players focused and ready to go. Because look, like I feel like I harped on this yesterday. Like, focus teams don't turn the ball over 5 times. Focus teams don't commit that many penalties. It's logged as 8, but they committed more than that the Broncos just didn't accept. And focus players don't drop the ball before they cross the goal line. Okay, like I bet if Dan Campbell or Mike Vrabel was the head coach here, then Jonathan Taylor wouldn't have dropped the ball. Those 2 coaches have a way of getting just the best out of their players. And their players just always seem to be focused. Like the Dan Campbell rant on Detroit radio yesterday, where he was like, the injuries don't matter. Who cares? We'll eat moldy bread and still go win. Like, is incredible. And you can kind of see that attitude throughout all of his players. Just the focus and the preparation and the no matter what happens, we're going to be tough. We're going to dig our heels in, and we're going to go after whoever we play. Like, that is evident in every Detroit Lions game. And when Mike Vrabel was the head coach of the Titans, you could see it for his teams as well. And now we've got this guy in Shane Steichen who's, I don't even know how to describe him. He's got this dull, boring tone whenever he speaks. And, he just doesn't seem like the kind of guy that consistently gets messages across to his players. Okay. Whereas a guy like Dan Campbell and a guy like Mike Vrabel and Bill Belichick and the best coaches in the NFL always seem to get their messages across like, don't drop the football before you cross the goal line. Now, while it is a coach's job to be sure his players are prepared and all those things, it also falls on the players to pay attention when their coach is getting his players prepared. Shane Steichen told the media earlier in the week that they have talked about this. They talked about it in the offseason. And look, like, I'm going to cut Shane Steichen a bit of a break here. I feel like people have been, wailing on him all week. Like, Shane Steichen took the time to bring this up earlier in the season. It's not his fault that Jonathan Taylor didn't file it away. I think it shows a lack of focus on Jonathan Taylor's part. And like, that really kind of feels like this Colts team. Just a consistent lack of focus. It's why we see, Anthony Richardson throw 2 picks. It's why we see Jonathan Taylor drop the football. It's why we see Adonai Mitchell not see number 15 for the Broncos. Okay, it's why Jonathan Taylor drops the football. It's why throughout the entire season we have seen inconsistent play from the Colts, right? They haven't put together a full 4-quarter game all year. Maybe against the Jets, but that's really it. But even against the Jets, they didn't run the ball well. We have not seen them play a full year. And I think that this inconsistency is due to a lack of focus at times. Like, how do you let, teams like the Packers with Malik Willis playing quarterback run for 200 yards on you? A lack of focus. Like, what they're going to do. Like, this has been an issue all year long. And of course, in the biggest moment, who you are shows up. And for the Colts, a lack of focus for half a second, dropping the football before crossing the goal line, could potentially have been the reason why they, lost that game against the Broncos and why they're going to miss the playoffs for, the 4th or 5th year in a row, whatever it is. And like, when you look at this Colts and you look at their body of work, like, it makes sense. This is who they are. And I'm very interested to see how they kind of respond from there. We saw them just completely and totally fall apart after, that fumble. And, from there, I'm interested to see what they do on Sunday against the Titans. Could that be the thing that just kind of ruins their season? Where they're just kind of like, yeah, we have a 6% chance to make the playoffs. So I mean, that's basically 0. Like, we're good. Like, if they lost on Sunday to the Titans, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest, because this isn't exactly, the toughest team in the world. But hey, I guess we'll have to wait and see what they do Sunday at home against the Titans. I'll be honest, if the Colts were playing on Saturday, I wouldn't watch, because I'm pretty jazzed up about the college football playoff. Indiana playing Notre Dame Friday night, and then we have a whole bunch of games Saturday night that I cannot wait to tune into. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the college football playoff, and if there's time, maybe a little bit on the NBA Cup. I have an interesting take on that. All that is coming up when we come back here in about 3 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice day. I got a big day today. It's leg day. Got to get the legs ready. Got some business to take care of when I go home for the holidays. My dad, he's been texting me during the show, asking me if I'm ready to play some pickleball when I get down there. And the answer is yes. Like I'm always ready to rock in the world of pickleball, especially when it comes to playing against my dad, because he's, it's like I played tennis, Jonathan. I got all these tennis trophies. I'm like, that's fine. This is not tennis. And then we play, and it's usually a pretty solid match. Anyway, I'm also ready this weekend for the college football playoff and everything. And so we got 4 games this week. They're all fascinating just because it's the first year of this. I got to be honest. I don't think all of these games are going to be great. But, I was sitting around last night. I was like, you know what? Let's just rank them. What's the most interesting game? What's the least interesting game? All those things. And the least interesting game to me is Clemson and Texas. I got to be honest. This game feels kind of pointless. Clemson couldn't beat South Carolina. They got crushed by Georgia. I think Texas is going to absolutely obliterate them just because they're so much more talented than Clemson. I don't think that game is really going to be close. The third most interesting game is Penn State and SMU. Now, Penn State is significantly better than SMU, but what makes this game intriguing and reveals another real issue in the world of college football is Penn State's backup quarterback is transferring, which usually is okay, he's the backup. Who cares? Yeah, the issue is Penn State features him quite a bit in packages, and he runs the ball, and he's very athletic, and they use him down in the red zone, and now he's gone. That entire part of their offense, poof, gone, is no longer a thing. And you look, I'm not gonna say all the things that you've probably read on social media, but the whole, these guys can transfer, before all the games are played, before bowl games and all that is, bad, and it's bad for the sport, and all that stuff is true. But this is the first time, though, how we're seeing it directly impact a game that's very important. Penn State, they're trying to win a title. Okay, and they're not going to have a guy that's been relatively important to their victories throughout the season. So I hate the transfer portal. Actually, that's not true. I hate when the transfer portal opens. They should push it to the end of the year after all the games have been played. Have it start, the second or third week in January. Just let these coaches worry about coaching while getting ready for their biggest games of the season. The fact that Curt Cignetti is having to, not only coach and get his team ready for Notre Dame, but also having to call portal guys and bring kids in for visits and do all those things at the same time is kind of ridiculous. I think college basketball is the exact same way. Coaches are having to recruit transfer portal guys during March Madness, and that just shouldn't be the case. Both college basketball and college football push everything to the end of the year. Let the transfer portal open, in that second or third week in January, and just let these coaches focus on coaching when their biggest games of the season are approaching. The second most interesting game from this weekend is going to be Indiana and Notre Dame, right? Interstate matchup, right? Which is, really cool, right? These teams are going, strength on strength. 20 minutes to start the show talking about, the Notre Dame run offense and this Indiana run defense. And is Indiana going to be able to actually move the ball because they've struggled against better defenses this season and all that good stuff. It's going to be fascinating. It's this new up and coming program, Indiana, against this, program in Notre Dame with a ton of history, even though they haven't added to that history in the last 25 years. I know that because they haven't been good in my life, or haven't been, a championship level team in my lifetime. So that game's going to be great. But then, of course, I think everyone agreed that the best game is happening Saturday night, Ohio State and Tennessee. Shout out to my buddy Zach Gray, who's going to come on Friday. He will be at the game, so I'm kind of jealous. If either one of these teams won the title, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, truthfully, like they are both that good. Whereas when I look at, every other team playing in the first round, Indiana, Notre Dame, Clemson, Texas, Penn State, SMU, I would be genuinely surprised if any of the other teams won the title. Yes, that includes Texas. Texas just hasn't been consistent enough this year. They haven't beaten anybody good, all that stuff, okay? So this game, like, it features two teams that could legitimately win the whole thing. Like, these are the two best teams in round one. And I'm absolutely fascinated by what's going to happen in that game. But once again, NCAA, please move the transfer portal back. Anyway, moving on really quickly. The NBA Cup, I thoroughly enjoy it. I know last night the game wasn't great. Sometimes there are nights where you just don't shoot the ball well, and that's what happened to the Thunder. 4 of 32 from three. They looked like, the Indiana Hoosiers, the way that they shot the ball so efficiently. And I was thinking about the Cup, and I want to raise a question of, is it better to not win the NBA Cup? Is it better to not play in the quarterfinal? Because teams like Indiana, the Pacers, that didn't make the quarterfinals got a ton of time off. Like, the Pacers got 4 days off last week. They're getting 3 days off this week. And that rest has been important for them. It's allowed Andrew Nembhard to get healthy. It's allowed Tyrese Halliburton a little extra rest, because I'm still not convinced that he was fully healthy to start the season. And if the Pacers go on a run from here, I think part of it will be due to the fact that they got all this rest while the Bucks and the Thunder and the Rockets and the Warriors kept playing games. Okay, like older teams like the Lakers have got to be enjoying the time off. I love the NBA Cup. The games are often competitive, right? Teams play hard. Like, people complain about defense not being played in the NBA. My question is, did you watch the game last night? Because the Thunder play outstanding defense. And did you watch the Thunder play the Rockets? Because defense was played in that game. Did you watch the Hawks play the Bucks? Because defense was played quite a bit in those games. Okay, I love the NBA Cup. The games are competitive. Teams play hard. But I'm just not convinced that every team is fully invested, right? Like I said, there are some teams that are older or have injuries that I honestly wouldn't blame them for not playing as hard as other teams. This rest for some of these teams, like the Pacers, as I just said, allowing Nembhard and Halliburton to get a little healthier, like, this rest has been nice for them. Like, they've needed it. And I'm sure that there are teams that in the future are going to look at the NBA Cup and be like, great, can't wait for those 2 weeks, because we're going to play like 3 games in 14 days, and we're going to have an opportunity to get healthy and go on a run from here. So that is the one drawback of the NBA Cup. I feel like it gives this rest advantage to the teams that didn't win games. Outside of that, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Can't wait to watch it again next year. Games in December finally matter. When we come back here in about 5 minutes, Luke Brennaman, reporter down there student reporter down there at IU, also is a co-host of a podcast for Chatterbox Sports over in Cincinnati. He's going to join the show. We're going to talk a little IU hoops and IU football. Should be a blast. Luke Brennaman joins the show here in about 4.5 minutes.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice week. Hopefully you forgot about all the struggles and all the issues that happened with the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. Now we're going to focus on all the issues with Indiana hoops, joined by Luke Brennaman, IU student reporter, also hosts a podcast over at Chatterbox Sports. Luke, what's going on, man?
How are you? Thanks for having me on the show. I think this is just one of those times where there's so much to talk about. I mean, the Colts kind of in the thick of the playoff push up until it really felt like in it last week. And especially with IU, I mean, this was a year where you get all these guys in the portal and you start thinking this could be a really good season. And next thing you know, we're looking about going to South Bend with the football team on Friday night. So plenty to talk about this week, but a really good week for Indiana sports, I would say.
It is. I just wish it was a little more positive. Like, you know, I'm getting on Twitter and there's the whole fire Shane Steichen, fire Chris Ballard. And then I'm like, I don't really want to see that. So I scroll down and then it's like fire Mike Woodson. And I'm like, oh, I guess I have to see this. So are you a Colts fan?
I'm not. I'm from Cincinnati, so I'm a big Bengals fan, but I thoroughly keep up with the AFC playoff picture and everything going on in the NFL.
What'd you think of the Colts debacle on Sunday?
I mean, when the ball got kicked off, I was watching this game pretty tight. I knew obviously they were a couple points underdogs, like close to a touchdown by kick, but they start off so strong, and I'm like, whoa, this would be a statement win for the Colts. You go into the break playing pretty good football. And even with like a touchdown lead, it was like 13-7. And to have the collapse that they did, I think the Jonathan Taylor play had a huge role in a 21-0 fourth quarter, because it was kind of over at that point, or at least had that feel about it once Denver took the lead in a game that Indy was really trying to slow it down. They wanted to play the pace. Their defense hung in there through 3 full quarters. I mean, heck, they gave up 10 points through, 45 minutes of game time football. So I think Richardson could have played better. You never want to see 17 for 38 turning the ball over twice through the air. But the Jonathan Taylor play, I mean, that's as unfortunate as it gets, as boneheaded as it gets in a situation that the Colts were in. Because, I mean, you're looking at 7-7 and very much in that playoff hunt with a win and a successful fourth quarter.
Yeah, it was so frustrating. It felt like the most Colts thing ever. Like, just having it right there and just finding a way to royally screw it up. That just seems like that's who the Colts are. Joined by Luke Brennaman, a student down there at IU, does a lot of stuff for their sports media department. Also hosts the Dialed In podcast, part of Chatterbox Sports. So let's jump into Indiana hoops. People, I love India. So I'm not from here, Luke. Like, I grew up in the South. So, like, moving up here and interacting with Indiana basketball fans, like, every loss is like the worst thing ever. Like, they just expect every team to go undefeated, and if they lose, it feels like the building's on fire. Even though, like, Indiana's lost 3 games to some really good teams, but that doesn't matter because everyone expects for IU to be great at basketball every single year. But to be fair to the people that are upset, like, there's definitely been some frustrating parts of watching IU basketball this year. What to you have been the most frustrating parts?
I think the most frustrating thing that is a glaring issue is the idea of Indiana cannot consistently play with anybody really good, or even in, I would say, I'm not going to say above mid-tier, but like, we're not even talking top 10 here. I mean, that Gonzaga team that stomped Indiana is a really good basketball team, but to lose 89-61 to Louisville, you kind of wanted to shake that one off. So now you're like, you pair Louisville with Gonzaga, you're in Atlantis, the guys weren't ready to play, and you come and you start conference play with Minnesota. I thought they looked really good. I was at that game. I thought that the final 10 minutes of the first half, I was like, this Indiana team surprised me because they're guarding right now. And if Indiana can guard you, they're going to be able to get out. They're going to be able to get loose. They have facilitators. They have playmakers. And it all came to a screeching halt on the road at Nebraska. I just think that when you lose the way that they have lost this season, it really does deflate you because you start playing that comparison game. It's like, okay, we've only had one chance at a ranked opponent, and they did not show up in the first 5 minutes against Gonzaga. Next thing you know, that game was over. So you compare Louisville. Louisville goes on the road in a rivalry matchup that last weekend against Kentucky and gives Kentucky everything that they could handle. I mean, knocking down shot after shot to cut the lead to 8-6, and they couldn't pull off the win. But they hung in there with a top 5 Kentucky team. The reason I bring up Kentucky is because this is a first-year head coach. This is a coach that hit the portal hard, and obviously Mark Pope knows exactly what he's doing, especially on the offensive end. But if you're Indiana and you're bringing in a $2.5 million transfer class, you're with a head coach that is now settled into Bloomington, and you're getting beat by nearly 30 points in conference play, 20 points to Nebraska on the road, it's just kind of off-putting in the sense of, is it this Indiana team not showing up, or are they really 18, 17 points worse than some of these unranked Big Ten opponents? Because you and I both know, you start scrolling down the schedule in this new and expanded Big Ten, if you start showing up like that, even at home, Indiana's going to get handed some embarrassing losses. So right now, I think it's early to really pinpoint who's at fault here, who needs to step up more. But you're getting a lot of those signs of last season of a team that doesn't come out of the locker room ready to play, and especially with the scoring droughts when they go 6, 7, 8 minutes with 4 to 7 combined points, and then they get just shelled on the defensive end. The game's over at that point against these high-level Big Ten teams.
I think you're exactly right. And I think the most frustrating part of that game against Nebraska, it felt like Indiana just didn't know where their bread is buttered, if that makes sense. Like you said, like they went on these long stretches where they just didn't score. Like to close the game, Nebraska just went on like this, insane run where Indiana just couldn't buy a bucket. And I'm sitting at home on my couch, and I'm getting really like frustrated. And my wife is like, Jonathan, why are you upset? Like, you're not even like an IU Hoops fan. But I'm sitting there and I'm just like, can we give Malik Renew the ball in the post? Because like I feel like he's the guy when things aren't going well that needs to get a touch, because you can throw him the ball on the block, and if he's able to get to his left hand, he's probably going to score. Do you kind of feel that same way with Indiana, where when things aren't going well, Malik Renew needs to be involved in some sort of fashion?
Absolutely. I also think that when things are going bad, we underestimate how quick Indiana goes. I think with an athletic guard like Miles Rice, and especially Galloway, who can really pass it, they do this thing where they want to push all the time, and sometimes they actually push after sacrificing a basket. So they'll get the ball in quick, and they'll try and get Ballo or Renew posted up downstairs. And when it works, great, it's an easy 2. But that really isn't the style of college basketball that many teams play, especially inside such a physical conference like the Big Ten. So when they get in the half court, it's almost like they have no idea what to do. It's dribble, pick up my dribble, dish it to the guy on the other wing, and then let him try to facilitate something on their own. There's always going to be that argument with Mike Woodson playing 2 bigs at the same time, especially with a guy now as big as Ballo is. I think Khalil Ware, you could get away with it. I mean, we saw him knock down some threes. He's freakishly long. He's a little bit twitchy above 7'5". Ballo is just an anchor in there, and I don't know if pairing a guy like Malik Renew, who when he does get the ball, he is dominant. I think Malik Renew coming into the season was going to be first team All Big Ten. I mean, he is so strong in the paint for a guy who's not all that tall compared to the rest of the forwards. He's just a skilled big. So I would like to see him maybe just get solo touches on a block and say, kind of get out of my way, let me have this dance more. But we ended up seeing that with Miles Rice at the guard. Indiana offensively pretty much was shooting blanks from a play perspective, and it was Rice just saying, all right, I'm a sophomore guard, I'm going to put it on the deck and make some fadeaway mid-range jumpers. But you and I both know, Jonathan, that's not basketball, and that's what we went back to. You watch the team and you can't pinpoint why you're so frustrated, but with how talented this roster is, there's NBA talk swirling around all these names, especially Mackenzie Mbako. I haven't really seen that sophomore jump out of him. I mean, statistically, he's playing great, but from a basketball IQ perspective, he's not playing a different style of basketball last year, and that's the team collectively, and that's where I think these glaring issues are, because they haven't shown improvement from last season to say, okay, we hit the portal hard, this is a better team, this is a tournament team. I really don't know about that right now.
Yeah, the Mbako point is interesting, joined by Luke Brennaman, student down there at IU, does a lot of work for their media stuff. The Mbako thing's interesting because like I love Mbako. Like you said, I think he's a guy who could play in the league at some point. 6'8", athletic. He can really shoot it, which is great. But the issue is like Indiana doesn't have enough shooting once again, which is a really frustrating Woodson thing. Like, yes, you brought in all this talent, but like the issue last year was they just didn't shoot the ball very well. And that kind of seems like it's going to be an issue again. Like Mbako and Luke Goody's supposed to be. Like, those are really the two guys that I trust to shoot the ball well. Outside of that, it's a little hit and miss. So the Mbako thing is interesting because, like, I think that they'd like for him to do more stuff offensively, but they just don't have other guys who can really space the floor. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And that's why I think it is such an issue, because you look at who Indiana got in the portal. I think Mike Woodson took a lot of grief last season in 2024 looking at his roster without a single healthy guard outside of a true freshman in Gabe Cupps, who you and I both know. I think Gabe Cupps can be a good point guard inside the Big Ten, but Gabe Cupps wasn't even recruited to be a starting point guard in Indiana. He can play good minutes. He can really guard you, but he was forced to run the show for a majority of the year. I mean, Xavier Johnson can hardly shoot free throws. That his game was driving to the rim and finishing in transition. So Woodson got a lot of grief, and it's like, okay, he didn't even have a healthy point guard. So now you go get Rice in the portal. This is a Pac-12 freshman of the year, one of the most talented guards in the country, having a little bit of a turnover issue, over 2.5 per game right now. But that's where it's like, you got to get Miles Rice and Trey Galloway facilitating more. And they do that kind of high ladder-esque dribble handoff with Ballo to get Galloway in like a 2-on-2 ball screen situation all the time. And that's where Goody and company of the shooters on this team, especially Mackenzie Mbako, there has to be a spot for them in a passing lane in a corner somewhere to really make this offense 5 ways, because it feels like when they get into sets, it's strictly a 2-way offense. It's a dribble drive and a ball screen, and if that doesn't work, someone else is going to do it. And we've seen basketball teams in history be really successful in that. But Luke Goody was brought in from Illinois to catch the ball, shoot the ball, and make the shot. You can't ask Luke Goody to come off a ball screen, driving, bouncing the ball, dribbling, and shoot off the dribble. That's not his game. That's not why you bring in a sharpshooter. And right now, that's kind of been the only way his buckets have come, or just a random transition threes. So it all starts in the bigs. Indiana has maybe the best bigs in the Big Ten, just on paper. When you look at Ballo and Renew, one of the best players returning in the Big Ten, then Ballo, the best transfer in the country last year. So from an offensive perspective, this team's got to go more, but you're not going to compete with anyone if you're going to give up 90 points to Nebraska. So I guess there's glaring issues on both sides of the ball right now. I think they're going to be okay because of how talented they are, and you mentioned that with Mbako. But the style of play right now, I would argue, is kind of putting a retainer and strain on how talented some of these guys really are, because they're not getting a chance. And they didn't bring in Mackenzie Mbako to go dribble, drive, or hit fadeaways in the post like he's done. He hits as impressive shots as anyone in the Big Ten, but that's not his game. Let's see a sophomore really blemish, catching the ball with momentum in a smooth offense that has some rhythm. I think this team can go a lot more than they're doing it right now.
Joined by Luke Brennaman, IU student reporter and co-host of the Dialed In podcast over at Chatterbox Sports. So last year, I got invited to play some pickup hoops in Bloomington down at the Hyper, right? I think that's what it's called. I played terribly, Luke. It was brutal. It still like bothers me how badly I played. But I remember I was leaving and I drove by this house and they had a chalkboard out on like their front porch, and all it said was "Fire Mike Woodson." Is that still the feeling on campus?
Sorry, I think I lost you there for a second.
Yeah.
What were you saying? Is that the feeling on campus?
Yeah, like, is there still like this unsettled feeling of like we aren't really on the Mike Woodson train right now?
Absolutely. And it's sad to say as a student, because I cover the football team. I covered the men's basketball team last year at the time. So I can say this just as a fan and as a student. That is the feeling. And it is sad. But it feels like nothing's changed. You would think that you could put blame in other places, but you bring up some other schools who have brought in head coaches and used the portal just as effectively, if not less effectively, of Indiana from a financial perspective, from a recruiting class perspective. I mean, all those rankings at the end of the day, you can interpret them as they want. But if the University of Kentucky, a clear-cut blue blood, some Indiana fans like to think that we are. I mean, with recent success, I don't think that's necessarily an argument right now. But these first-year head coaches are having success. I mean, John Calipari in Arkansas went on the road to Michigan and beat a Dusty May Michigan team that was ranked inside the top 20 at the time. so you can have success with new faces around. So that's where I think it's an argument that Mike Woodson can't entirely escape there. I just don't know what is changing that locker room from a year-to-year, month-to-month, week-to-week perspective, because Indiana phoned it in at the end of the year last year. They picked up about one good win in the Big Ten. I think it was against Michigan State. They split with Ohio State, or no, they swept Ohio State. It was like, all right, we go into next year. We have some decent wins. We've proven we can play with people. You get some studs. And it is just some glaring similarities to last year's team, where if you're coming out of the locker room not ready to play, I mean, before you knew it, in the Gonzaga game in the Bahamas, they were down double digits on the road against Nebraska. It was 12-2 to start that game. So is it a talent issue? Is it a coaching issue? I think this is typically, as a head coach, when you catch a lot of grief. Fair or not?
Yeah, I totally agree. Joined by Luke Brennaman. As he mentioned, he helps cover the IU football team. So you've been with them all year. Are you surprised by this level of success from, the football team this year?
I'll be quite honest with you, Jonathan. I'm a sophomore here, and I had a heck of a freshman year, met all my friends. But, sophomore year, you're kind of dying to come back to college. And you're settled in now. You kind of feel like it's your place. And that's how I felt in Bloomington. And I sign up as a sports media student I apply for it. It's a competitive application. I get it. And it's like, sweet, I'm covering the football team. But then I kind of start diving into Indiana football, because you and I both know the students haven't really been too invested in Indiana football in a long time. And Cignetti gave the students grief for it. Well deserved. Stop leaving the game. Show up to the games. And he's given people.
Luke, you there? We may have lost you, Luke. I don't know if you can hear me, but our phone is not great. Luke, you there? Luke.
Shoot.
Oh, wait.
Hello?
Yep, there you are. Maybe.
All right. Sorry. I don't know why that would cut out.
I don't know.
Maybe?
Our phone here is terrible. Let's just blame it on that. All right. As you were saying, you were talking
you
about.
guys have me at all or no?
I do. Can you hear me?
Okay. I got you. I got you. Yes, sir.
Before you dropped, you were talking about how Cignetti was giving the students grief for leaving games early and all those things. We may have lost you again, Luke. Luke, I'm going to let you go because we're having issues with our phone. Thanks for your time, man. We're going to have you back on. You don't know this. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I am an Arkansas fan. And the fact that you brought up Coach Cal and the success that they're having is major brownie points on my show. So we'll have you back on. Thanks for your time, man. Sorry about our phone. That is Luke Brennaman, student reporter down there at IU, helps cover the football team. I hate that our phone messed up there. We're about to get into the game on Friday night, which should be a good one. IU, Notre Dame. I'm going to give you my thoughts on that game when we come back here in about 3 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Big thanks to Luke Brennaman for joining us in that last segment. Gonna have to have him back on. I thought he was really good. I appreciated his energy. I think we're going to look at Monday because he's going to be at that Notre Dame and IU game, which will be an absolute blast for him. Speaking of that game, it is, the biggest game in Indiana football history, which is awesome. And, I was thinking about the game last night, and I created these 4 questions about the game that I think are going to dictate the outcome. And I've got a lot of audio to get to here. So first question that I came up with, how does Indiana deal with the Notre Dame run game, right? Because Notre Dame, look, they are a physical football team. They play tough defense. They run the football. And it's not just with Jeremiah Love, who's a really good running back. I mean, the dude's athletic. If you talk about Notre Dame enough, eventually your Instagram feed will throw up a video of Jeremiah Love just jumping over defenders. Like I said, the guy's a freak. He's fast. He's just a really good running back. But Indiana also likes to run Riley Leonard, right there, starting quarterback who transferred in from Duke. Another just athletic kid. Like, this is just that's how Notre Dame wants to move the football. They want to run the ball. And Curt Cignetti was asked earlier in the week about Notre Dame's willingness and want to run the football.
I think at this point in the season, you've seen about everything, right? And you put the best scheme together based on who you're playing and what they do. And, Notre Dame's an excellent football team. They're extremely well coached. In reference to your point, they run the quarterback quite a bit. And he's an excellent player. I've been watching him for a couple years, studying Duke offense when he was at Duke. And, he's a competitor. And he throws the ball well, and he's got good movement skills, good size. So, when you play Notre Dame offensively, it starts with the run game, and the quarterback's a big part of the run game, not only on the design quarterback runs, but when he drops back and he's in the pocket and escapes the pocket, and his ability to, create plays with his arm and his legs.
Curt Cignetti right there talking about Riley Leonard, the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, and not only his ability to throw the football, but also his ability to run the ball, which is really kind of what he's done for Notre Dame super well. Only thrown for 2,000 yards on the year, which is a pretty pitiful number in this day and age of college football. But his ability to run the ball kind of makes up for the lack of passing yards. He's ran for over 700 yards this year on 124 carries. That's like 6 yards a carry, which is pretty impressive. And that tells me that he's going to run and carry the football on Saturday. Luckily for Indiana, this is one of the best run defenses in the country. The front seven is the best part of this football team. It's been the most consistent part of this football team all year, even against Ohio State, a game where they lost, 38-15. What was the one thing that was consistent? The run defense. Ohio State's got 2 NFL level running backs out there. And aside from the long, 39-yard Tre'Davion Henderson run, they did a really good job of keeping those guys in check. So this is strength on strength. Indiana's ability to run the football, Notre Dame's ability to run the football, and Indiana's ability to stop the run. So, of course, earlier in the week, Coach Freeman was asked during his press conference about this Indiana defense.
Moving along to Indiana, obviously it's a 11-1 football team, very talented, but you can tell they're coached well. They play, as I often say, with the clarity that you look for when you watch film, right? It's a team that plays fast, a team that understands what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it. And so you can tell they understand what's expected of them. They make quick and fast decisions. A very disruptive, chaotic defense that is, I think, number 1 in the country at stopping the run. And so we understand it'll be a great challenge for us, and we got to have a great week of prep as we get ready for Friday night. Again, I think they play aggressively. They're I often say they create chaos. They have a really unique scheme in terms of some of their twist games and pressure packages, but they're talented and they play hard. Their D line is really, really good, and it's hard to simulate some of the things they do in practice. But our scout guys have done a good job at trying to give us a really good look, as they've done all year. But they are well coached, they're aggressive, and they're a confident group.
Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame head coach, right there talking about this Indiana defense that has been really good all year. Once again, this has been the most consistent part of their team all year, the defense. And this is the thing to watch on Friday night. Can Indiana slow down Notre Dame's rushing offense? Because look, if Notre Dame can run the ball, then they're going to win the game. I have no doubt about it. Okay, if Indiana, though, can figure out a way to slow down that rushing attack, then they will have a great chance to go on the road to South Bend and win that game. Okay, but Notre Dame has a great offensive line. They have multiple running backs that can really play, and they've got a quarterback who can run the football in addition to the running backs. And I think the most revealing thing about Notre Dame and why they aren't good enough to win a national title, with that being said, like, they're more than capable of beating Indiana. That's why they're favored by over a touchdown on Friday night. But they don't want to throw the ball. Their leading receiver has less than 500 yards receiving. Notre Dame wants to run the football because their best players are running backs. And I'm just not convinced that they trust Riley Leonard. Like, he's had some bad stretches this year. Against 1-11 Florida State, he barely completed half of his passes. The Texas A&M game to open the season wasn't exactly smooth sailing. He threw 2 picks against NIU. Okay, since that game, they've tried to keep the ball out of his hands. That's why they run the football an insane amount. In 7 of Notre Dame's 12 games this year, Riley Leonard threw the ball less than 25 times. If Indiana can force him to throw the football, then they'll have a great chance to win this game. And I'll be honest, like, I have concerns about this Indiana offense, which leads me to my second question. How does Indiana deal with Notre Dame's defense? Because we've seen them struggle offensively against good defensive teams. Like, they struggled against Michigan, who has a good defense, and they struggled against Ohio State, who has a good defense. Okay, and those are the 2 best defenses that they played all year. They scored 15 points against Ohio State, and they scored 20 points against Michigan. Right? Those are by far their 2 worst offensive showings of the year. Notre Dame has one of the best defenses in the country. And Coach Cignetti was asked about this talented defense earlier in the week.
They're good. Their defense is good. And Al Golden does a great job of coordinating their defense. And, they're a high pressure blitz outfit, quite a bit of man coverage. And then, they got the zone mixers and fire zones that keep you off balance a little bit. But they get 11 guys doing their job pretty consistently. They play fast. They're physical. They're good tacklers. And they get a lot of hats to the ball. And they adjust well during the course of the game. They haven't given up many points because, they got good coaches and they got good players. And up front, they're quick, a lot of movement. But when you take into account then the blitzes, right, and there's a lot of moving pieces. And they play coverage extremely well. They do a great job in man coverage. So they're a really good defense, and that's why they've won a lot of games.
Curt Cignetti right there talking about Notre Dame and this defense that is incredibly tough. And as I mentioned, like, Indiana has really struggled against better defenses this year. And Curt Cignetti mentioned it multiple times there in that clip, how much Notre Dame likes to blitz, which is problematic for the Hoosiers. Like, if you just think back to that Ohio State game, Indiana comes out on that first drive and they march it right down the field. Easy drive. Okay, they score 7 points. They're up 7-0. They forced Ohio State to go 3 and out on their first possession. And it's like, I think Indiana's got a pretty decent chance here to win this game. And, things are looking good. Things are looking up. And then Ohio State's like, what we're going to do? We're going to blitz the rest of the game. Like, we're just going to blitz the crap out of Indiana. And the Hoosiers couldn't handle it. And Notre Dame could very easily do the same thing And I'm intrigued to see how Indiana's offensive line handles it. Because obviously, if they can handle the blitz, then Curtis Rourke is going to play a great game, which leads me to my third question. How does Curtis Rourke perform? He's been great this year. He got some Heisman votes, which is cool. Okay. But he struggled against the better defenses that he faced this year. That second half against Michigan wasn't pretty. That entire game against Ohio State, he was bad. Okay. When they couldn't run the ball against Michigan, he wasn't very good. And when Ohio State sent the house, he couldn't handle the pressure. And this is a legit Notre Dame defense that defends the run well and isn't afraid to blitz and has really good corners that are going to do a good job defending these Indiana receivers. But Curtis Rourke's played a lot of football. He's played in big games before, and Coach Cignetti made it pretty clear that he's got a ton of faith in Curtis Rourke.
Well, a lot of things go into that. First of all, he had a body of work before he came here, and he's played a lot of football. So, you learn by doing. And he's gotten a lot of reps at playing quarterback, a lot of successful reps. And, coming to a new school is an adjustment schematically. Some of the concepts may be similar, but the language is different. And obviously a new way of doing things, new players and what have you. And a lot of new portal guys at receiver. And so, but I think it all starts with protection. We've done a pretty good job of protecting him most of the time. We have certainly had our hiccups during a couple games. And we've got a group of receivers that have really good ball skills and can make contested catches, and our backs are good out of backfield as well. And I think, schematically, a lot of our pass plays, they have answers versus man zone, 1 high, 2 high. And he's a quick thinker, and he processes quickly, and he's extremely accurate. And he's good in the pocket. He doesn't panic. And, he's a really good quarterback, and he has certainly taken his game to another level. There's no doubt about that. He was a player of the year in the MAC in 22, but suffered an injury at the end of the season. So he really could not benefit from sort of the off-season strength and conditioning program going into his senior year. Still had a good year. But since he's come here on a bigger stage, I think he's built on every success and developed more confidence and belief and continues to improve. And I think you really saw that starting game 2 and then out on the West Coast against UCLA. And then, when you can involve 10, 12 different guys in terms of touches between running backs, tight ends, and receivers, that's a great thing to have multiple guys that can separate, get open, and make plays.
Kurt Cignetti right there talking about his starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke, and just the success that he's had. And look, he went 2 minutes there talking about how Curtis Rourke is built on his successes and, how he's the player of the year of the MAC and all those great things. The issue is that a lot of his successes have come against teams that aren't very good. Okay, when he played the better defenses on this Indiana schedule, he struggled. Right, 17 of 28, 206 yards and 2 touchdowns against Michigan. Also threw an interception in that game and didn't move the football and was only able to score 3 points in the second half against Michigan. Then against the Buckeyes, by far the worst game probably of his college football career. 8 of 18, only 68 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. The performance against Michigan was fair. But once again, that game against Ohio State was just abysmal. Okay, Indiana has to find a consistent run game in order for Curtis Rourke to play well against Notre Dame. Like, if they just get into, we're just going to drop back and try to throw it, I don't think that that's the recipe for success against a talented Notre Dame defense on the back end and a team that likes to blitz, and we saw Indiana struggle with that against Ohio State. So they have to figure out a way to run the football, which is what they want to do anyway. So yeah, and then in addition to that, like, the offensive line has to give him time, and they obviously have to pave the way to run the football, because the most important thing when this Indiana offense is really rolling and they're putting up points is when the RPO game works, when they're able to run that run-pass option stuff. That is where Curtis Rourke has been at his best this year, just being able to snap it, read the linebacker, and then either make the throw or hand it off. That is where he's been at his best, right? And you can only run that stuff if your offensive line is able to create running lanes, and if they're able to create, or if they're able to block whoever's, the defensive line, right? And their struggles against the blitzing Buckeyes and their inability to block on the interior against Michigan in the second half was where we saw this Indiana offense struggle the most. So they have to figure out a way to run the ball, and they have to give Curtis Rourke time, and they have got to figure out a way to have success with their RPO game, because that is when this Indiana offense is at its best. And, Marcus Freeman is fully aware of that. He was asked about Curtis Rourke in this offensive line earlier in the season.
Every great offense is led by a quarterback, and this is no different. He's a veteran. He's been in big games. He's played in a lot of football games, and he makes really good decisions. Like, he knows where he's going with the ball. He knows what he's looking for, and he is able to execute at a high level. But more than that, I think their offense being able to run the ball is something that they've done really efficiently. And when you think about weather conditions, you think about a Friday night in South Bend, Indiana, weather could have an impact on the football game. And they've done a really good job running the ball. And so we have to prepare, obviously, for the things he does well in the passing game, but we got to make sure we can stop the run too.
Marcus Freeman right there talking about this Indiana Hoosiers offense and Curtis Rourke. And he's right. Like, this Indiana offense starts with running the football. They have to be able to run the ball Friday night because, first and foremost, that's what this team wants to do. When you look at their splits throughout the season, they tend to run the ball more than they throw it, and part of that's because they have a lead late and all those things. But even in big spots, like, they want to run the ball. If this is just Curtis Rourke's going to drop back and chuck it 50 times, then I don't like Indiana's chances. They've got to find a way to be balanced against what is a really good Notre Dame defense. And then final question here about this game. Who's going to make the big swing plays? Okay, Notre Dame and Indiana both do an excellent job of turning teams over, and turnovers and special teams can oftentimes dictate the outcomes of big games. Okay, and Notre Dame is good at both of those things. Right, here's Curt Cignetti talking about Notre Dame's, excellence on both defense at turning teams over and their special teams.
I think we're plus 15 in turnover ratio. They're plus 16. And they've forced 25 fumbles on a season. That's a high number. So ball security for us and them is going to be really important winning the turnover battle. I'll tell you, the other area that they're really dangerous is, their punt return team. They've blocked 3 punts and forced a couple bad snaps because of the pressure they put consistently. So they've gotten points there. And then, when they punt, they faked 3 punts, which those kind of plays can be game changers in a game. So they use their punt and punt return as weapons. And we got to be right on point. Our teams have been really consistent this year other than the Ohio State game. And we're going to need a good special teams effort this week.
Curt Cignetti right there talking about Notre Dame's, outstanding defense and special teams. And look, we saw how special teams can cost you a game. Once again, going back to that game against Ohio State, when they give up, a punt return for a touchdown and Indiana's punter drops the ball off of the snap, and it wasn't great. And when you're the less talented team, like Indiana is going to be on Friday night, you have to do all of the little things. It is required. Okay, like you can't drop a snap on a punt. You can't fumble the football away. Like you can't do anything to give Notre Dame an additional advantage because they already have an advantage. They're already at home. They already have better players than you do. So when it comes to Indiana on Friday night, their special teams has to be invisible or a major positive. And when I say invisible, I mean when you go out, on Saturday to a bar with your buddies and they're like, hey, man, did you watch Indiana Notre Dame? When I say invisible, I mean you don't talk about it. Like you didn't notice it. Okay, it has to be invisible or a major positive. Okay, it can't be a thing where you're like, geez, I can't believe that the Indiana punter dropped another snap. Like that can't happen. And of course, they had to avoid turning the football over, which is something Indiana's done a really good job of this year. Curtis Rourke's only thrown like 4 interceptions. I think all of them came in that game against Maryland. That's not true. He threw one against Ohio State. Against Michigan. So they tend to do a good job of protecting the football. They've got to find a way to turn Notre Dame over and do those things. I am incredibly excited for this game and really for the college football playoff as a whole. I'll be talking about it the rest of the week and, of course, on Monday as well. But we have to continue talking about the Colts and all the issues going on with them. They've got a big game Sunday against the Titans. You know, they're going to try to keep their playoff hopes alive, but they're going to need quite a bit of help to sneak in. I talked a little bit yesterday about why I thought Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen would be coming back next year. But I think I may have a way to get rid of them and still make a really good hire. I'll explain that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Jonathan Smith Show. No matter how you're listening, maybe you're watching on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're listening via the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. Maybe you're watching on YouTube, _ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me there at Ticket 1430, if you want to follow us there as well. Now, the Indianapolis Colts, they've got some issues. They've got some decisions that need to be made in terms of Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. It's just been a lot of losing during the Chris Ballard era, and Shane Steichen has not exactly fixed that, even though they're probably going to go 9-8 again for the second year in a row. And I explained yesterday why I thought the Colts would bring Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard back for next year. Chris Ballard signed an extension through 2026, and it's just hard to believe that Jim Irsay is going to pay not one, not two, but three head coaches and two GMs. Okay, Frank Reich is still on the books through 2026. Then you'd have to pay Shane Steichen until 2030, plus the new head coach, right? So there's your 3 head coaches, and then you have to pay Chris Ballard plus whoever the new general manager is. Now, that's a lot of money to fork out to 3 people who don't work for you. So, like, from a business standpoint, like, it makes sense why, Irsay would bring Ballard and Steichen back for another year. But what if there's a solution where you didn't have to pay, 2 new people to come in, and instead you only had to pay 1? Would that change things? What if instead of hiring a new head coach and a new general manager, they just hired Mike Vrabel to do both? My take is Jim Irsay should hire Mike Vrabel to be both the head coach and the general manager. Okay, he came out earlier in the season and said that he would go coach the Jets if he approved of the general manager hire. Okay, because he obviously wants a say in personnel and who they're drafting and who they're signing in free agency. Oh, the idea of the Colts hiring someone who would sign people in free agency. That gets me excited. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I don't think Mike Vrabel would disapprove of himself also being the general manager. Okay, like Mike Vrabel wants a say in personnel no matter where he goes. So just let him do both. He's the most coveted head coaching candidate in the hiring cycle this year. And when it comes to the Colts, like he knows the AFC South better than any of the top coaching candidates that are going to be available. Let's be honest. If the Colts decide to move on from Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, it would not be the most attractive job out there. Like there are more attractive jobs out there than coaching or being the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, outside of the fact that you have excellent job security if you come here because we don't like to fire people. Whoever resurrects the New York Jets will be seen as a god in New York City, which, if there's any place that you're going to be viewed as a god, like New York City would be a pretty great place. The Bears have Caleb Williams, and there's this similar aspect of whoever can, reignite, what the Bears had in the 80s, like that person will be treated like royalty. The Raiders are going to have a top pick, so if you like Shooter Sanders or Cam Ward, like that is a very desirable place to be. The Jaguars have Trevor Lawrence, who we've seen play well and win a playoff game and do those things. All of those jobs are more enticing than what the Colts have to offer. What do the Colts have to offer? An average roster? A young, raw quarterback who hasn't shown much in his first 14 starts? It's not great. If the Colts want to have a home run hire and they want to inject some life into this fan base and they want to inject a winning culture into their building, then Mike Vrabel's the guy. And if they want to hire Mike Vrabel, they have to offer him something better than everyone else. They have to give him an offer he can't refuse, to quote The Godfather. Offering him absolute control could be that thing. Saying, you know what, Mike? We're in some deep crap over here. And we need you to come in and fix it. Not just as the head coach, but also as the general manager. We'll let you draft who you want. You can sign the free agency players that you want. And then obviously, you can coach however you want as well. We don't care as long as you come in and win. That is a thing that could be very enticing. Like if every other place is just like, we just want you as a head coach. But if the Colts were to offer the head coach and the general manager spot, like that I think would be very enticing for Mike Vrabel. And with his track record, I would trust him to do both. If the Colts want to inject toughness and a winning culture into their franchise, then having a guy like Mike Vrabel to both select the players and coach the players would do that almost immediately. This is the quote-unquote quick fix for the Indianapolis Colts. Call up Mike Vrabel's agent. Tell him that this is what you want to do. Right? You'll have to pay him a little more than a normal head coach because obviously he's going to have general manager responsibilities as well. But in the long run, it'll be cheaper than hiring both a head coach and a general manager. Right? So now instead of, paying 5 people between your general manager and head coach spot, you're only paying 4. So you'd save a little bit of money and you'd have a guy in Mike Vrabel who's capable of doing both. And a guy who's got a winning history. Okay, like he got the Ryan Tannehill-led Tennessee Titans to the AFC Championship game, and they had a chance to beat the Chiefs in that one. Seriously, like this is a guy that wherever he goes, whether it's the Jets, Colts, Raiders, Bears, wherever he winds up, he's going to have an immediate positive impact on whatever franchise he comes in contact with. And there's a part of me that's like, you have to hire Mike Vrabel just so that the Jaguars can't. Okay, because that's a team down there that's got some talent and what I think is a good quarterback, at least a better quarterback than what Mike Vrabel had when he was in Tennessee. And it would just be incredibly frustrating if the Jags were like, you know what, we're going to hire Mike Vrabel. And then we looked up and it's like, all of a sudden the Jags are just winning the AFC South every single year because they hired that guy. Meanwhile, the Colts are still pedaling in mediocrity because they still have Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen employed. So Mike Vrabel, he seems to be the answer. And I would just greatly appreciate it if the Colts hired him. I had some thoughts about the NBA Cup. I watched the final game last night. The NBA Cup's fun. The players care, which is always the most important thing. And as I was watching and I was thinking about the other teams, I had to ask this question of, is it better just to not win the NBA Cup? Like, is it better to not make the quarterfinals? Because teams that don't make the quarterfinals get a ton of time off. The Pacers got 4 days off last week. They're going to get 3 days off this week. And that rest has been important for them, right? It's allowed Andrew Nembhard to get healthy and not miss games. It's allowed Tyrese Halliburton to get healthier because I'm still not entirely convinced that he was healthy before the season started. And if the Pacers are able to go on a run from here, then part of it is going to be due to the fact that they got bounced really early in the NBA in-season tournament. And so it allowed them this extra time off for guys to get healthy. Okay, like just think about it. Like the Pacers didn't have to play 3 regular season games without Aaron Nesmith because they got bounced early. So now, like, that's 3 games that they're actually going to have him for because he's hopefully going to come back sometime, not this week, but next. Like, is it better to not win the NBA Cup? I think it's a fair question. I think older teams like the Lakers and Kings have been enjoying the time off. Injured, banged up teams like the Pacers have been enjoying the time off. I love the NBA Cup. And the games are oftentimes competitive, right? Like, just go back and watch the semifinals and the quarterfinals. Like, those guys really care. Those guys are playing defense. The game last night wasn't great because, the Thunder shot the ball worse from 3 than the Hoosiers do. So, anytime you do that at an NBA level, like, you're going to get beat. It's pretty simple. Okay, but the NBA Cup, it's fun. It's entertaining. The players care. That is what matters. And, I think this is going to continue to be a thing that I look forward to. I think that as fans kind of realize how hard these teams play, we're going to start seeing, more casual NBA fans tune into the NBA Cup as well. Maybe not the group stage games, but the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals, because, if you watch those, 8 games, however many there were, those guys were dialed in and playing incredibly hard, which is all that we ask for when it comes to the NBA. That's going to do it here at the Real Jonathan Smith Show. The Dan Dockett Show is set to come your way. Going to be a great, great show as always. So the Dan Dockett Show, it's on from noon to 3. Make sure you download that Indy Sports Ticket app to tune in so that you don't miss a thing. Seth Greenberg joining the show at 12:30. Should be great. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in about 5 minutes. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. Make sure you don't miss it.